I'm sure you've all heard some of the things that I'm about to share with you, but one of the things that always amazes me is the fact that people will say things like, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. And some folks have such an astounding experience on occasion that they say, I just can't believe what my eyes just saw. And then we know that in recent years, the criminal justice system has begun to realize that eyewitness accounts of anything are almost always skewed by the experience of the person who thinks they saw what they are relating. And many persons who have been on death row because of eyewitness accounts have discovered that they are now free because other kinds of evidence have been used to prove their innocence. I think about all of that stuff when I think about the gospel reading from John this morning. All of those disciples, and not just the 12, but many who were gathered in that room after the resurrection, after the crucifixion, wondering what to do next. Certainly this was a dark moment in their journeys. After having heard what Jesus proclaimed for those 3 short years, and having seen what Jesus accomplished in human lives, it was a real traumatic moment for them. What do we do now? Do we simply return to the spaces and places we occupied before we began to trust in this Jesus of Nazareth? Shall we just simply quit what he has asked us to do and go back to the places from which we came? What is there for us in the future if he is not present with us? We have come to rely on him to show us the way, to give us the guidance we need to keep going and the encouragement we need to remain faithful to what he has been teaching and proclaiming. And there in that room where they had gathered, Jesus appeared. And they saw him. And yet there was some doubt. Thomas is the one disciple who says that unless he can both see and touch, he's not ready to believe. And so on another occasion, the gospel tells us that Jesus came again. And he appeared and spoke to Thomas. And he said to him, go ahead, touch the nail holes in my hand. Go ahead, put your hand in the side where the spear of the Roman soldier pierced my body. And Thomas, in that moment, we don't know whether he actually did that or not, but in that moment, he made a confession that would hold him solid for the rest of his days. My Lord and my God, I believe. What is it that has led you to the point in your own spiritual journeys that you can say, I believe? And what kind of an impact has it had on your life and on my life for that matter? I don't know that I would even be here today if I hadn't made a confession of faith as a teenager, somehow confirmed by God that this was in fact the way in which God wanted my life to unfold. I suspect Thomas in that moment when he said, my Lord and my God, it was such a confirmation of what had been going on for those 3 short years that he found the courage to continue this work throughout the rest of his days. So where is it that we somehow come to that moment where we believe and our lives are changed? You know, Jesus in that upper room didn't just say, peace be with you. He actually commissioned those folks. He said, you've got to continue the work which I started, and you've got to continue doing what God has in store for this world. Don't abandon that simply because my physical presence is no longer with you. I will give you a spirit that will enrich and strengthen you as you continue to face the obstacles that this world puts in your way. And believe me, friends, we all know that every one of us has to deal with obstacles that are put in our way as believers. It's just the way life is. But the way that God would have us go is to deal with those obstacles from the point of view that God is with us, that no obstacle this world puts in our way will overcome us, and we will indeed share the victory of Jesus Christ, not only in this world, but in the world to come. You know, I'm interested in the words trust but verify. As you know, President Reagan used those words when he was negotiating some kind of a nuclear treaty. And as I thought about Thomas and the disciples gathered in that upper room, I thought that all of them had questions that needed to be answered. And so my thought was question but verify. You know, so many people just simply don't think deeply enough about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. It's so easy in our culture to say, I believe, and then simply to move on with the patterns and ruts of your life as they have been in the past, without having your belief impact or affect how you change life in the future, or how God, in fact, changes that by the indwelling of the Spirit. Those people gathered in that upper room after the crucifixion and the resurrection, how many of those folk actually saw Jesus at the site of the tomb? All we know about is Mary, maybe Martha, maybe Peter, maybe John, the beloved disciple. They came back reporting what they had seen to these folks. But Jesus wasn't willing just to let people hear that he had been raised from the dead. He appeared to them. He came to them and made himself known to them. You know, over the years, Jesus does make himself known to us in a variety of ways. It isn't always that we see Jesus standing in front of us, but we see Jesus in events and circumstances of life when we think there is no way in which anything is going to work out the way we hope it will, and then somehow God acts to move us into a new direction. That's exactly what I would think God would want from us. When we have concerns or questions of faith, we need to be honest about that, and we need to pursue those, because that's the way God really makes God's self known to us in a real and vibrant and living way. When I was a young man, I was asking questions all the time about God and God's will and how God was at work in the world. I was asking questions about the meaning of Scripture and all of the things that were surrounding what it meant to be a believer. I don't think that changes just because we grow older. I think there's a Thomas in all of us. I think there's a Thomas in us that says we need to have some kind of confirmation that God is truly at work in this world and in our lives. And so I think this morning about question but verify, because God is not willing to leave us in those spaces like that upper room without any sense of purpose, direction, or future. God comes to us and is with us. You know, the reason that Christ was sent into the world was to show us a way of life. And when Jesus went to that upper room and appeared to those disciples, he actually said, I am sending you. You read 1 John, you read Acts, all of those are responses to the commissioning that Jesus gave those disciples in the upper room. We are commissioned. We are appointed. We are sent. But what do we share when we're sent if we don't have belief? Belief is at the very heart of who we are as a people belonging to Jesus Christ. Those disciples in that upper room had to go out into the world and take the good news of the resurrection and the good news of Jesus Christ to places that were in darkness. Friends, we look at our world today. Look at the darkness that's out there. The inhumanity of the human family toward each other. I just had finished reading the book Killing Patton that one of our church members gave to me. And you cannot imagine the atrocities that the human family have perpetrated upon each other. And what kind of darkness is there out here in the world? And then we look at the kind of conflicts that are raging around the world right now. And we think about the darkness that's out there. And yet Jesus has commissioned us as a source of light in the darkness. Think about that. There is power in our faith. When we sing that hymn, they'll know we are Christians by our love. What does it mean to us? Just words printed on a piece of paper? A piece of music that we like the beat of? Or is it a commissioning to us? Is it a way of saying to us, this is what we are about, and this is what will transform the world and bring light into the darkness? That's exactly what Jesus was saying to those disciples in the upper room. John got the message. The book of Acts shared the message with us. Those people who were believers cared so much that they pooled their resources, of course thinking that Jesus would be back within a very short time. But they cared about each other. They supported and nurtured each other. And that's what we are called to do to the world around us. They will know we are Christians by our love. Do we care enough to put our belief into action? You know, the church in every generation has faced this challenge. We do it pretty well here in this little church, but it's still a challenge for us, for the world around us. Question, but verify. Come to the point where you say, as Thomas did, my Lord and my God, I believe. And when you can say that with the depth of passion that Thomas said it, then it changes the course of life all of your days. My God, my Lord and my God, I believe. The resurrection is God's message to the world. Christ has overcome death